G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza, and in this video we're going to be talking about stick figure animation. Now I know for some of you this might feel like we're going kind of back, we're regressing our animation a bit, but stick figure animation is actually really quite useful. And I personally started my animation journey animating solely stick figures for about 3 years. I think the reason why early animators gravitate towards doing stick figure animations is quite obvious, because the amount of work that it takes to produce something is much lower than if you were doing like full drawings or scenes. But then the other reason too isn't just because it's easier, it's also because there's a lot of satisfaction to be had. And anyone who's watched the JAZZA'S stick fights or the animator versus animation videos or anything like that, you can really kind of get the feeling of what I'm talking about. And it's quite simply that the motion that you can convey and the action that you can produce in a stick figure animation can be really entertaining and really fun to watch and produce. Now, I had been intending on doing a video on animating stick figures for quite some time, but the reason I'm doing it now all of a sudden is because last week I launched a new channel called Tabletop Time, and the intro is done with these stick figure characters, and that's the file I have open here, and the finished intro looks like this. So after launching that channel and that intro animation, I actually had a few people contact me asking me about the stick figure stuff, and a few people in the comments were asking about it or commenting on it too. So what I thought I would do is make this file freely available to you. So if you're interested in how I made that intro animation segment, I've just taken the first part where it's just the two stick figures interacting, and you can access that and take a look at how I built it with the raw files yourself by checking out the link in the description. So in this video, I'm going to go through this animation segment that I did to just kind of roughly explain how I put it together, but I'm also going to create a new animation file where I look at different ways of doing stick figures for animations, because there are different approaches you can take, and this is one that I had never used before making this intro with the really blocky limbs that I find really satisfying and you might be interested in learning about too. So I'm going to the first frame. I'm just going to break things down into layers. Obviously the bottom layer, we have this background which is set to be the size of the stage. The layer above that, I have a clip of a character walking in. Now you can see that it's tweened. That's because this is actually a graphic clip, which when I double click and enter it here, you can see that I have a looping running animation. Now the running animation is the same for both of these characters. For the character on the right, I simply copied and pasted it and flipped it horizontally, so we have the same clip, but I also made sure that they played at different times so that they weren't running in sync with each other. Now right around frame 18, you'll notice that this one loses its head. Well, it loses its head because I have the layer hidden. So when I show that layer, and I'm going to hide the other character for now so we can focus on this one, you'll see that I have one layer for the head and one layer for the body. That's because this character is no longer in a graphic clip. Instead, we have the head, which is on one layer, which is a graphics clip so that I can tween it and create a smooth motion, whereas the body itself is a bunch of line work, and I can actually tweak and edit this line work position and change the shape and pose of the body. So I've gone through and frame by frame edited this character so that this layer, which is a simple chair, can be animated with him and that their motion can work together. So I have the run approach, he walks behind the chair, and at the point that I'm animating him frame by frame, I'm also animating the chair to move along with him. I did exactly the same thing with the other character and the other chair, but I made sure that the sit down motion was different so it didn't look like I completely mirrored the other character's animation. Now at the top frame here, I have this table, and I'm going to go inside here to show you how I've animated it. For the most part, up until frame 45, everything is plain and normal. We've just got this little simple table shape. But then when the animation starts, which is when the table is hit, I've broken up the animation with two layers. One layer, which is set to wireframe by default, is just the vertical part of the table, and then the other is the horizontal. And I did that so I could animate the top of the table moving in a reaction to the hit on the table without messing with the vertical part of the table. Next, underneath those layers, I have this layer which has a blue clip on it, which acts as the board for a board game of some sort, which as you can see just kind of pops up. And then underneath this, I have a mask where the dice appear. And the reason I do it in a mask is so that they can pop out from behind the table without being shown underneath these clips. So that's how I animated the table, and you can see that with the timing of the hit, the animation of the table reacts to these characters' motion. From there, everything is pretty much the same. I'm doing a lot of frame by frame animation with the stick figures and tweening with the head. So that's just a quick sort of run over as to how I made this file, and you can play with it yourself, but now we're just going to spend a little bit of time playing with some stick figures. So today I'm going to talk about 4 different kinds of stick figures. The first kind looks a little something like this. We draw a circle for the head, then we draw a line for the body and a leg and another leg, then we have an arm and an arm. These used to infuriate me, but weirdly enough, this was one of the most common kinds of stick figures. Now, seriously, we can do better than that. But it's strange how frequently I've seen this character around. Now, I'm going to leave him here as an example because he is that painful, but is also very common. But he is the first kind of stick figure that people tend to animate with. But the next kind that I'm going to draw is going to be a little bit more refined, and I'm going to show you how to make it look a little more substantial. We start off with a circle. That's perfectly fine, but what I'm going to be doing now is holding shift, and you can see that no matter where I move my mouse, it keeps a perfect circle shape. If I let that go, I can get these weird ellipse shapes, and as you can see, the head on the left has that weird shape. So I'm going to hold shift and make sure I get the perfect circle. Now the next thing I'm going to do is actually convert this head to its own clip, just so that it's always the same. That means that I can edit the body, I can tweak limbs and make all this motion whatever I want, but the head will always be in uniform with its original size, which is good. So I'm going to hit F8 and I'm just going to call this head. I'll make it a graphic, hit OK, and then we have our head. Next, I'm going to get my line tool. Now we are essentially going to do what I did with the character on the left with a few minor changes. The first is the line weight. You can see that the default line weight is set to 1. I'm just going to draw a line and select my line, pull that line weight up until we get to a line width that looks nice and substantial. And I think about here at about 14, and I'll just enter that, is a good line weight. And I'll just make sure the bottom of the head connects with the top of the line, and then we've got the start of our body. The next thing I'm going to do is add some limbs. Now to do this well, you need to make sure that this little button here is activated and it says snap to objects. So when I have my line tool activated, which is right up here in the toolbar, or the shortcut is N, I make sure my little magnet is turned on, the snap to objects. And what I actually do is I don't draw from the end of the last limb. I actually draw from empty space and then in to the end of the last limb. And you can actually see that that's where it snaps easier. So if I draw out in, then we have that snap taking place. Now that's okay. Obviously the limbs are in a bit of a weird position at the moment. Don't worry about that because now it's really easy to edit. Now all I have to do is get my selection tool, which is up here in the toolbar, click that, and I can actually just move the end of that line anywhere I want to. Now something to keep in mind is if I go back to my line tool, which you can do by pressing this or hitting the shortcut which is N, I can use the selection tool without actually clicking it in the toolbar just by holding Control. So you can see I've got my line tool here. If I hold Control, I have that selection tool kick into gear. So I can just hit Control, move, and let it go. So it's really useful to get used to doing this because then you can keep your line tool active and create new frames of animation without ever having to leave the line tool. So you can just keep drawing, edit, tweak without moving your tools around, and things become much simpler and faster. So to draw the rest of this character's body, I'm just going to pull the middle of his body up and I'm going to get my line tool and draw the bottom of his legs connecting to his knees. And I'll just find an area that I want to act as the ground and then pull the middle of his legs up so that his knees are kind of only very slightly bent. Now something to keep in mind is that with stick figures, people tend to have very loud limbs, have the arms stretched out wide and the legs stretched out wide, but we want to actually go for a bit of a naturalistic look. And to do this, we just kind of have pretty relaxed limbs. Now you'll notice that the lower parts of the legs are completely straight, and I can actually relax this a bit if I deselect my magnet and hold Control and just kind of tweak it in just a little bit, just so we can have a bit of angle on both of those, and it just makes it look a bit more natural. So sometimes you might find yourself putting that snapping magnet tool on or off. That doesn't matter, it just depends on what you're doing. And so the next thing I'll do is add some arms. Another disgusting thing that you'll notice on the character on the left is the arms begin around the center of the torso, and that always irritated me. So we're actually going to have the arms come up to right under where there is a neck. So we're going to have a little bit of gap between the top of the shoulder and the bottom of the head, and bring the bottom of the arm down. Again, like the legs, I'm actually going to add a joint. So we have a little elbow in there. And then I'm going to add my other arm, connect it up there at the neck, and then draw in the end of the hand. And I'll bring the head down a little bit. I actually tend to find having no neck tends to look a bit better personally, but this is the second type of stick figure that you can draw. Now, some people actually like to have little feet, and I think that looks fine if you like it. It depends on what your preference is, but if you do feet, just make sure that they're really little. Just make them pop out just a teeny tiny bit like that. And again, it's just with the line tool, but we just add that. And there we have our other stick figure, and I'll move him over here. That's stick figure number 2. So you'll notice that stick figure number 2 is the kind of stick figure that is used in those ZAZZA'S fighting stick figure animations. But in the videos you may be familiar with called Animator versus Animation, there are a couple of kinds of stick figures, and we can recognize this kind, but there's another kind which is a brush tool stick figure. So to make this, we hit B to select our brush tool, where we can just draw with our pen, and this usually requires a tablet to draw, whereas the line work stick figure you can kind of do with a mouse if that's all you have. But if you have a tablet, creating a brush stick figure is a lot more simple. Anyway, with the brush tool selected, if we go all the way to the left here, we have the option to select brush sizes, and if you select the largest brush size, we can then kind of draw a line thickness that looks quite similar to stick figure number 2. Now I'm actually going to do the same thing with the head. I'm going to take his head, copy, and I'll paste it, and use that as the base of the head. I actually tend to find that shorter, fatter limbs with this type of stick figure look a bit better and a bit more cute. So now with my brush tool selected, I can add the body and a leg, another leg, a little foot on each side, an arm on his waist, and another arm scratching his little head. And you start to get used to little movements in the head or the arms really conveying a lot in pose. And that's why I actually think starting off working with stick figures is really valuable, because you learn a lot about the poses that a body looks good in, or motions that work really well. So that's the next kind of stick figure. And as you could tell, that was really quick to produce. And if you have a tablet, even if it's like a bamboo or something quite simple, you can really produce a lot of content with this kind of stick figure very quickly, and it ends up looking pretty cool and even a little bit more naturalistic than the character on the left, though either can be quite workable. And I'm going to show you how I made that stick figure in the tabletop time animation, and it's very similar to our character on the left there. So I'm going to copy and paste my head and bring it over there, and very similar to our character on the far left, I'm going to select my line tool and just draw a line, and I'm going to find a line weight that I like. So I'm actually going to go quite a bit thicker with this, and I'm not going to connect the head to the torso. Having a floating head can be kind of a fun little variant thing. It's like the Rayman effect, I guess. Now with this line selected, you'll notice there are a bunch of other options there on the left in the properties panel that we haven't really fiddled with yet, and one of them I discovered was quite cool in creating that blocky stick figure effect. And quite simply, all we do here where it says cap is hit the little drop down box and turn it to none. You don't want to set it to square, because even though you will get a similar effect, it actually adds a bit to the ends, so that when you actually connect a line to itself in more than one place, it starts to look really blocky. Whereas with the cap set to none, when I draw from one line connecting it to the other, you'll notice that if I connect several at once, they all are nice and soft and round in the middle and still blocky at the end. And that way I can have several limbs go into the one origin point, like the middle of the torso, between the legs or between the arms, and things look perfectly normal. And similarly to how I did stick figure number 2, I simply draw in the lines to create the pose. Now, something to keep in mind with drawing this kind of stick figure is that if you in any instance have the entire stick figure selected, when you hit Control-Enter to render and test the frame, during animation it will actually break things up. So if you find things are starting to break up in your animation, make sure to go through all the frames and just deselect everything. And of course, the benefit of using line stick figures is that you can actually select them post-drawing and edit the line weight if you prefer, and you can mess around with all different things like colors and things like that. But these are the basic array of stick figures that I see people use, and my personal favorite now is the one on the right, but I always started off with number 3, and I had done a bit of playing with number 2 as well, which is very useful for fight scenes and a bit more solid stuff. Anyways, I hope this has been interesting to you aspiring animators out there. If if you're interested, make sure to check out that link in the description, which goes to the original Tabletop Time intro as a bit of a reference, so you can use that and muck around with it if you'd like. And if you're interested in further learning a bit of frame by frame animation, I'll link to a video at the end of this video where you can go check out some advanced animation and motion techniques. So thanks for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you found this video useful. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more animation and art tips and tools and fun times, and subscribe to Tabletop Time if you're interested in checking out that stuff too, if you like nerdy role-playing games and stuff like that. Otherwise, until next time, I'll see you later. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel to see new content every week. Check out more of my stuff by clicking the annotations over there. You can get the reference files for this tutorial by clicking the link in the description, and if you want the reference files for all the tutorials I've ever made, check out the tutorial archive. If you're looking for a great place to collaborate, explore, or share your own content, head over to newgrounds.com. That's it for now, and until next time, see you later.